Welcome to Mr. Biz Radio, biz talk for biz owners. If you're ready to stop faking the funk and take your business onward and upward, this show is for you. And now, here's Mr. Biz, Ken Wentworth.
Welcome to another edition of Mr. Biz Radio. Me, Mr. Biz, Ken Wentworth. And this is a, dare I say, special edition of the show where we're going to talk about these two individuals who happen to be the U.S. presidential candidates, and they recently had a debate. Talk a little bit about that, but more so on this during the show. We're going to talk about the economic policies that both of them have proposed. I wanted to break some of that down because you've been hearing so much about it. You hear bits and pieces, at least I've been hearing bits and pieces of it here and there in the media, and I feel like, especially, you know how the media is, right? So if you're on the left, you're going to pick apart Trump's plan and just pick out little pieces or little out of context and say, oh my gosh, this is crazy. This is, silly. If you're on the right, you're going to pick Kamala Harris's and you're going to say this, And so I wanted to look at some of the bigger pieces. I wanted to go through the whole dang thing, but I'd be about, 4 shows. So I did a bunch of research. I watched the debate twice, a little bit painful, but I wanted to catch some of the nuances of it. And we're not going to talk too much about the debate, but I do want to bring up a few things on that. And then we're going to hit some of the highlights on some of the big things that I think will move the needle. So on first of all, the debt. I want to talk about the debt/deficit, talk about that a little bit. Tariffs, big hot button, right? I want to talk about the tariffs. Taxes. There's a couple of miscellaneous things I'm going to mix in here as well, but taxes, the corporate taxes, business taxes, personal taxes, the proposals, some of the big things that have been highlighted, and there's some fallacies out there, some misconceptions. Again, I'm going to talk all facts on this stuff. I shouldn't say that. I'm going to present facts, and I'm going to throw some opinion in as well, because of course I've got some opinions on these things, and I'll try not to be too over the top with it, but some of these things are just crazy. So first thing, during the debate, so they talk about these different economic policies, different proposals they have, not only economic, but other proposals they had as well. I'm a numbers guy. Costs were not talked about. So it's great to propose stuff, but I can propose, go home and tell my wife, like, hey, let's go buy a $10 million house. She's going to love that idea. She'd vote for me, right? Can we buy a $10 million house? Of course not. So it's completely useless. It's meaningless. Why would he mention that? Another thing that I was very disappointed in that was not mentioned at all during the debates was the freaking federal debt. The federal debt right now is sitting at $35 trillion. And I know you hear that thrown around. You're like, boy, that's a lot. It's unbelievable. That is equivalent, as of right now, if every person in the United States, we could pay this off. I'm going to tell you how. I got Mr. Biz plan on how to pay off the federal debt. If every person in the United States wrote a check to the federal government for $104,000. So if you got $104K laying around, every single person, including your 2-year-old, we can get out of this. We can be debt-free. That's how terrible this is. One thing real quick I want to mention, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole because I want to make sure it gets through some of the stuff, but you hear debt, federal debt, and you hear deficit thrown around a lot. I want to make sure that people understand that, because I think a lot of people maybe don't understand it. Deficit is essentially, I'm going to simplify this, but the deficit is a year on year. So the government takes in how much money and they spend how much. So they take in, we run at a deficit every freaking year. That's why we have the debt we do. The deficit each year contributes to the debt. Okay. So if we take in $6 trillion and we spend $4 trillion, we actually have a surplus of $2 trillion. Unfortunately, that's not what we're doing. We're doing the opposite. We're taking in much less than we spend. And then, of course, that adds to the debt. So the debt is the accumulation of deficits over time. The other thing the debt is, and this is the other thing, let me make sure I get the number right here in my notes. So especially with the interest rates high right now, the interest, so again, you hear 35 trillion, oh my gosh, huge number, right? The interest that the government has to pay on a daily basis is $2 billion. That's just the interest. is $2 billion a day. That's how much 35 trillion is with today's interest rates. Absolutely insane. The other thing I was disappointed that it wasn't brought up is leading from the deficit and the debt is Social Security and Medicare. They both not really said much about it in their policies. All the research that I did, neither one of them said much about it. They talked about protecting it, but like, is there going to be are there cuts to that? Because that is making up a huge part of the annual deficit each year, because those costs are becoming more and more because we have more people retiring, more people are getting further along in their careers, et cetera. So that's a huge number. Again, didn't bring anything up about it. Crazy. All right, first issue outside of all that, put aside debt and all that crazy stuff. This one's kind of a miscellaneous thing, but I wanted to throw this in because it's a big one. So Kamala Harris has talked about instituting a policy for down payment assistance for housing, $25,000. Again, what's the cost? What's the anticipated usage rate for that? So what's the cost of that? How are we going to pay for that? Are we cutting something else to enable that? Or are we just going to print some more money and have more deficit each year and then, more add to the debt? That's number one. She mentioned, this is the crazy part. Like, of course, she's from California. She was senator in California. She mentioned California. Anyone who knows anything about real estate in California, $25K is not going to help people buy a house in California, like at all. The housing in California is absolutely insanely expensive. $25,000 isn't going to do much to help many people at all in California specifically. The other thing it's going to do is it's going to crush the housing market. I mean, people are automatically, housing costs are going to increase, right? If you're getting ready to sell a house and you know that people have an extra $25K to help them, what are you going to do? Your realtor is going to tell you, jack up the price, right? People can afford more. And if think about it this way, if it's $25K for a down payment, and generally speaking, let's say the down payment is 20%, they're not going to jack it up by 20%. I'm sorry, by 25,000. They're going to jack it up by significantly more, by 100,000 to, I'm sorry, 100 and what would it be, $120,000, because 20% of that is 25K. So, oh my gosh, people can afford this much more. Not that everyone's going to do it that much, but it's going to have that impact. And here's the other thing that everyone's missing. Oh my gosh, it's free money. This sounds great. It's going to help young people get into housing. Yes, on the surface, that sounds fantastic, right? Here's what I fear it's going to set up, because of the lack of consumer finance knowledge in this country overall, is that people are going to get into houses they can't afford. Again, outside of California, even just a regular house, you buy, a house and you get this extra 25,000, that helps you afford a more expensive house. Well, a more expensive house has a more expensive monthly payment. So you still have to make those payments every month, right? That 25K is only for the down payment. Now, what happens when you have to start making those payment, your monthly payment, and you can't afford it, and you get yourself into a bad situation financially, and it crushes your budget? I mean, again, I think people are missing this. Like, oh my gosh, 25K, help young people, or just first-time home buyers. Again, on the surface, sounds great. Not exactly a great thing overall, because people aren't thinking about the longer-term impacts of that. All right, we got to hit a break here. We're going to come back. I want to hit tariffs right off the bat, and then we're going to dive into some different tax things. The tariff thing was hilarious on the debate, but we're talking about some facts about tariffs.
If you would like to reach hundreds of thousands of business owners every week, Mr. Biz Radio can help. Our show airs globally 7 days a week for more than 25 hours across several internet radio stations, plus 20 plus podcast platforms. Also, video exposure on the new exclusive Mr. Biz Network streaming channel, which gets blasted to 100 plus streaming platforms, and the Mr. Biz YouTube channel, and our 350,000 social media followers multiple times every week. Join Mr. Biz Nation as an advertiser by emailing us at info@MrBizSolutions.com.
Attention, Mr. Biz Nation. We have an exclusive offer just for you. Get lifetime access to scarcity countdown timers and logic links for only $69. Yes, you heard it right. Only $69. These tools will add urgency to your email campaigns and website pages, helping you increase conversions, sales, and capture more leads. Don't miss this incredible opportunity. Visit GetPulseTools.com now and take your business to new heights.
Got a question for Mr. Biz you want answered on air? Email it to info@MrBizSolutions.com. Now, once again, here's Mr. Biz.
All right, welcome back to the show. Got a little fired up there. Look, this stuff frustrates the crap out of me sometimes, especially when it seems like, and I'm not talking about any particular party, but just politicians in general. I feel like too often they don't think of the cost and how things are going to be paid for, and they just start throwing stuff out, especially during, when you're trying to get elected to some office or whatever. Again, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, you can throw out these ideas, but without knowing the cost, and then more importantly, how the heck are you going to pay for it? Like, again, is there a new tax you're going to implement? Well, we need to know about that, because maybe I'm in favor of whatever the policy is, but I don't think this new tax is fair, or I don't think it's appropriate, or whatever it might be. All right, so tariffs. So one of the things that was interesting during the debate is, and I've heard it in her, her stumping speeches and everything as she's campaigning, is that Harris has repeatedly been tearing down Trump on the tariffs, saying these tariffs were terrible. They, led to this and led to that bad stuff. And Trump mentioned this during the debate when she actually kind of attacked him on it. And I'm glad he fought back and said, look, if my tariffs were so bad, why did you choose to keep them? You've been in office for 3.5 years. You kept some of my tariffs. You kept all of his tariffs, including the ones on China that are roundly, most of the Democrats have roundly said, oh my gosh, bad idea. They kept them all. Now, why is that? They're such a bad idea. Why do they keep them? As a matter of fact, I did some research on this, of course, and the Biden administration with Harris added some tariffs. Now, they were limited, but they added on to what Trump had enacted while he was president. For example, one of them was on electrical vehicles, on EVs coming from China specifically. So clearly they see that tariffs on China, not a bad idea, because they kept Trump's tariffs on China. And then they even added, there was one other, solar panels, and I think one other thing too, is I saw 3 things primarily that they had added tariffs on. So I thought that was kind of funny. Trump has said that he not only wants to continue with the tariffs that he's put in place, he wants to increase them. He wants to increase them fairly significantly on China, as well as he wants to add some smaller tariffs on other European countries where we have massive trade deficits, where they're selling into the United States. We're not allowing us to export to them. They don't want our stuff. And so that's the overall strategy that Trump is trying to take with these tariffs. Is he wants more business here. He wants to drive more business here. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But one of the things that Harris mentioned was that she said Trump's tariffs are going to cost the average American household $4,000 next year. I did some research. According to Goldman Sachs, it's more like $1,700. Still not insignificant. Still a cost there. But here's the thing. Tariffs, this is a little bit of I'm going to spin my opinion on this. Tariffs could be very likely in most situations are going to be one of those things where in the short run, there's a little bit of pain. In the long run, it should be a significant gain, meaning that one of the reasons why I'm putting words in his mouth, but one of the reasons why I assume he wants to put tariffs specifically on China is to take jobs from China and bring them here. Have manufacturers, instead of buying cheap goods overseas, have them manufactured here in the United States. If they're importing goods and they cost more, they're going to figure out a way to do it here. Now, the reason why in the short term it could be more expensive, in the long term it could be great, is it takes long term to build a new factory. Let's say I'm a company and I've been buying cheap goods from China for a long time, and now, oh my gosh, those prices have gone up. I'm going to look for other options, right? But in order for me to move that onshore and produce it here in the United States, I probably have to buy a factory. I have to create a factory. That's going to take some time, right? So in the first year, 18 months, 2 years, maybe even a little bit longer, there could be a little bit of pain. In the longer run, it should drive more business and more jobs back to the United States and less imports. The bad part about tariffs, short term and long term, and it's going to sound a little bit weird, it drives up the dollar of the value of the dollar. the US dollar. So the currency, you might say, well, that sounds like a fantastic thing. It is in many ways. In one way, it's bad though, and that is that it's going to decrease our exports. Think about if the value of the dollar goes up, then the goods that we're exporting to fill in the blank, any other country, the cost of those goods is going to go up. Consequently, much like I mentioned for the United States, it's almost like somewhat like a tariff, even though it's not. It's a tangential impact of tariffs, of the value of the dollar going up, which is, again, is not a bad thing on the surface, but it could decrease exports. In some ways, that's okay. Again, thinking a macro view, because hopefully more people in the United States, more companies, more consumers in the United States will be consuming more US goods. So there'll be less of a need for exports. So I don't know what that balance looks like. I'm not smart enough for that. That's above my pay grade. But that's one of those things that's, something that needs to be considered. I haven't heard anyone mention that. And I think that's something that's very important to keep in mind with tariffs. Again, short-term pain, potentially. Longer you keep them in existence, the better they should be. That's how it should work. Okay, on to taxes. So first of all, on corporate taxes, Trump in 2017, decreased the top corporate rate from 35% down to 21%. That was in 2017 while he was president. His latest proposal was to further cut that from 21% down to 15%. Frankly, I think that's too deep. I'm not in favor of that. I think 15 is too low. There was a benefit of moving from 35 to 21 for sure, and we saw that in job growth, et cetera, in this country. I think moving it further down to 15 I think that's too much. Harris is looking at moving 21% to 28%, going the other direction. Honestly, I'm not in favor of either one. Frankly, I think from what the results that we've seen from the cut from 35 to 21, which that Trump made in 2017, which, by the way, at the time, a lot of people criticized, oh my gosh, this is going to be catastrophic. This is a terrible idea, because it was drastic. That rate had been 35% for a long time. We saw some really positive results. Why not stick with it? It hasn't been in effect that long. It's been essentially 7 years. It's been in effect. Let's kick the can down the road a little bit and see if we continue to see those benefits before we make any other drastic changes. I mean, think about it. Going from 21 to 28 sounds like, oh, that's only 7%. That's a 33% increase, right? 7% on 21. Going from 21 to 15 is similar. That's about 30-some%, right? So, close to 30%. Let's not make any drastic changes. Let's stick with the 21. We've had some benefits from that. Another thing that Harris has mentioned, that a corporate side that she wants to do, stock buybacks. She wants to change that and move it from 1%, which it is currently, to 4%. I'm actually in favor of that. I don't know if 4% is the right number. I'm in favor of increasing it, though. Stock buybacks, for those of you who don't know, is a way for a company to buy back their own stock. And the goal of that is to drive up the price of their stock. And they do it for their shareholders, right? Which is great for the shareholders, i.e. wealthy people. Not always wealthy people, but benefits the wealthy a substantial amount. Cut back on that a little bit. We don't want as many stock buybacks. We want them to still happen, but let's increase that a little bit. And again, I don't know what the right amount is, but I think quadrupling it from 1 to 4 is too drastic of a measure. I'd rather see us to go to maybe 2, 2.5, see how it goes before we move any further. So that's on the corporate side. Got a whole bunch. We're going to hit a break here. Got a whole bunch more to cover on the personal side: capital gains, unrealized gains, minimum taxes, all that good stuff.
How would you like to have direct access to Mr. Biz to help you run your business more profitably and more efficiently? At MrBizSolutions.com, you get live access to not only Mr. Biz, but also several of his hand-picked and trusted business experts, each with 20-plus years of experience to help you optimally manage and grow your business. That's just the start of where Mr. Biz Solutions begins. Learn more at MrBizSolutions.com. That's MrBizSolutions.com.
Attention, Mr. Biz Nation. We have an exclusive offer just for you. Get lifetime access to scarcity countdown timers and logic links for only $69. Yes, you heard it right. Only $69. These tools will add urgency to your email campaigns and website pages, helping you increase conversions, sales, and capture more leads. Don't miss this incredible opportunity. Visit GetPulseTools.com now and take your business to new heights.
Check out all 3 of Mr. Biz's best-selling books at MrBizBooks.com. Now, once again, here's Mr. Biz.
All right, welcome back to this special edition of Mr. Biz Radio, talking about Trump and Harris and their economic policies that they've been campaigning on and they debated on here recently. A couple of things. I actually want to start off with this one. It's not necessarily on the personal side, but it's kind of, I guess, a little bit. But Harris has proposed a startup business tax credit. So there's currently, we already have that actually right now. It's $5,000. She's proposing to multiply that by 10 and make it 50,000. Again, it's one of those policies where you go, oh my gosh, on the surface, this sounds fantastic. We're going to give more tax credits to people to be able to start businesses. Oh my gosh, business ownership, entrepreneurship. This is great. You're telling me, Mr. Biz, you're not in favor of this? I'm not in favor of it, but I'm not really haven't digested it fully. And the reason is, so it's $50,000. And again, it's not, she's not giving you $50,000. It's a tax credit. So it's to offset the first $50,000 you make in income in a new business, essentially. You can take it all in 1 year. You could take it over multiple years. Let's say you make 10 grand the first year, you make 20 grand the second year. So that way through 2 years, you've taken $30,000, but that means in those 2 years, you paid $0 in taxes. Again, on the surface sounds great. Couple things, again, beating a dead horse here. How are we going to pay for it? Because you might say, well, how much does this cost? Well, you can estimate this because what she mentioned when she brought forth this policy is she wants to have 25 million new startups during her first term. 25 million new businesses times a $50,000 tax credit, assuming that they all applied for it, they all got the full 50,000 in those 4 years, equals $1.25 trillion. Not an insignificant amount. How are we going to pay for that? By the way, how about the missed opportunity on taxes on whatever those businesses have made? That 50,000, the 1.25 trillion that previously would have been, most of it would have been taxed, right? Other than the 5K that I mentioned is currently in place, 45,000 of each of those would have been taxed. Those tax dollars are gone. So not only we're losing tax dollars, and now we're giving away more tax dollars. So how do we pay for that? So again, it sounds great on the surface. How are we paying for it? Okay, I want to get through some of this stuff. We got limited time here. Capital gains. One of the things that Harris wants to do, she wants to move capital gains tax, which has been this way for a long time. This is long-term capital gain. So if you take a capital gain and you've owned the asset for at least a year, you pay 20%. If it's less than a year, you pay whatever your income tax rate is, which is typically higher than 20%. So the 20% is kind of a little bit of a break. She wants to move that to 28%. And that is only for people who make more than $1 million a year. So the goal is this is going to impact people that are a little more wealthy and could afford this increase in tax rate. I don't think it's a terrible idea. I think, again, I think 20 to 28 is maybe a little bit too drastic for me. I'd rather take some baby steps towards that, maybe go to 24, 25. Again, test the waters, see what kind of impact it has, because this could impact how people are handling their portfolios, how, their stocks, different things like that. It could have an impact on the stock market, which again has a huge impact across the economy. Two things I want to make sure I get through here that were significant, that she wants to have a 25% minimum tax. This is on income tax, personal income tax on people. And people are like, oh my gosh, 25% minimum, this is a bunch of crap. Well, you got to dig down a little bit further. It's only for people with a net worth of greater than $100 million. Pretty wealthy people. As a matter of fact, you might say, how many people is that? Well, I just happen to know that number. In the United States, there are people that have a net worth of greater than $100 million. There's 10,660 of those people out of 330 million. Pretty insignificant piece of the pie. However, as you can imagine, those people make a lot of money. The top 1% of the country makes a lot of money. And those people are in the, obviously, percentile of 1%. But so, and I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I mean, maybe again, 25% is maybe a little bit high. Maybe we started at 20 or something like that. What I would like to see to be able to have a more concrete opinion is what is the average tax that's in the last, say, 5 years that people in that greater than 100 million, what's their average tax rate? If it's 5%, that's freaking ridiculous. And it might be. But we also need to think about the longer term impacts. If you had that, is that going to impact how these people are doing things? Are they not going to invest as much in their business? Are they going to invest more in their business? I mean, we're going to think about the longer term impacts and not just short term. Another thing that's been widely panned, I was one of them, on X, on Twitter, taxing unrealized gains. This is an asinine idea. Point blank, end of story. Absolutely asinine. Very quickly to explain it, taxing unrealized gains means, let's say you buy, the simplest example is let's say your 401k. Let's say you have 401k and you have $100,000 in it. In a given year, it goes up by, let's say, 20%. And so it goes up to 120,000, using round numbers here. So you have a gain of $20,000. Now, it's in your 401k. That's not your money. It's sitting in your retirement account. You have not touched any of that money. It's paper. It's a paper gain is what they call it. She wants to tax you on that. So you would have to write a check to the government, let's say at 20%, or if she, well, I guess the 28% she wants to do is for greater than a million. Let's say make less than $1 million. Most people, let's say it's 20%. You're going to have to write a check for 20% of the $20,000 gain. That's a $4,000 tax. Let's say you're making 40 grand a year. You just happen to have accumulated $100,000 in your 401k. That sounds crazy, right? So you have to write a check for $4,000. Who has that, right? These people, the people we're talking about in that scenario, it'd be crazy. Now, that's how I thought initially. Now, and some people on the right are actually pushing it in that way. It's not actually correct. It's for people who have a net worth of greater than $100 million. So again, ultra wealthy people, they can afford that. It's still a terrible idea. An unrealized gain is just that. You haven't realized it. What I would propose instead, another way to tax that. So let's say I own, I'm Bill Gates and I own Microsoft stock and I got it, I owned it and it was a zero cost basis, right? I started the company. Now it's worth, I don't know what his net worth is now, but let's say it's worth $100 billion. That's all unrealized until he actually sells the stock, right? Well, what she's saying is she would want to tax you on that 100 billion in this case. One of the ways to attack that, I think in a different way that would be much more effective, is a lot of wealthy people will take their money, let's say that 100 billion, say Bill Gates, he passes away in his will, he gives that $100 billion of net worth of Microsoft stock to his kids or whoever. It doesn't matter who he gives it to. He gives it to somebody. What happens is there's a provision that kicks in. It's called, it takes on a stepped up basis. So what that means is those people that inherit that 100 billion in stock, it becomes valued at $100 billion, meaning that 100 billion never gets taxed, because it never got cashed out. And then someone inherited it. And then they're not taxed on it. It's not worth zero up to 100 billion now. It's just back to 100 billion. So if it goes up from 100 billion, they cash it in, they have to pay tax. Otherwise, you could cash in that 100 billion and pay nothing on it. Like nothing. I think that's crazy. I think they need to do away with that and have some sort of basis for that tax. So you can't continue to pass down these ultra wealthy, stock holdings, whatever they might be, generation to generation without ever being taxed. I think that's a way to attack that. Now, again, it's going to be a much smaller percentage of the population, but we're already talking about 10,000, almost 11,000 people in the entire country for some of this stuff anyway. So anyway, a lot of stuff. We covered a lot of stuff. Hopefully you guys found this valuable. We'd love to hear your comments in the comment section. Let us know what you think. Thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your week. And don't forget, cash flow is always king.
To become part of Mr. Biz Nation, follow him on all social media platforms or never miss a show by going to MrBizRadio.com. If you prefer free video content, visit the Mr. Biz YouTube channel or check out his streaming channel, which is available on 100 plus streaming platforms at MrBizNetwork.com.